coming back. I know there's talk about maybe Al Blades going pro. He has no business going pro at this point. But, if you get those guys back, you have the true freshmen now and Clark and Dunson develop, then you can kind of put this guy away for a year or two and, really, coach him up, get his body right, do all those things and then see what you got, down the road. But, if they have the traits, I say absolutely take them. But, we shouldn't be loading up on guys that are running, 4.9s and, super undersized guys that don't have a chance at being productive.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, going back a little bit to touch on your point about the quarterback, not necessarily needing a QB in this class because of the weird situation. I want to echo that. I'm previously on record in this podcast saying, you always take a quarterback and, no exceptions. However, I think just the way that De'Aaron King's season has gone, I would be absolutely flabbergasted if he left to the NFL to be a quarterback. I'll qualify it by saying that. He is a good enough athlete that he could be a slot receiver, or running back or whatever in the pros. I don't think this season is going well enough for him to, to be an NFL quarterback this season. He might need another year to try to improve his draft stock. So of all years, I mean, you hit the nail on the head again, and that we probably have Oops. All right. You guys not hear me?
Oh, you cut out for a sec.
Okay. Yes, and just so to that point, like I 100% agree that we shouldn't focus on the position that these last two guys are playing. It really should come down to talent. If it's not Jake Garcia, that's fine. Even though that's contradictory to what I've said earlier, like at this point, we just need the two best guys. It would be really great to see us get Terrence Lewis. Our linebacking core is much maligned this season. And then, corner could help too. But I don't know. We'll see. I don't really care. As long as it's, two talented kids that look like they can contribute early in their career. I'd really like that.
Well,
Sorry, on the Terrence Lewis point real quick, it's something I thought about a lot because, it's like kind of caught between that. Like, I'm always of the mindset, like, kids that make mistakes when they're really young, it's hard to like condemn him for the rest of his life, even though some of the things that he allegedly has done, I don't know anything like specifically for sure, but, you hear rumors and obviously like they're, totally unacceptable things that he's done. My question is, and I would really love to like hear from the staff, and obviously they would never say it, but I would really like to know if they're hesitant on giving him like a real committable offer because of what he has done or because of what they're worried he might do in the future, and it seems like a very kind of simple difference. Like, isn't it about the same? Like, I don't think it's about the same, because I think that if it's for what he's done, then I think you could probably work around that, because like you can kind of make a decision and say, well, we're actually okay with it. But if they're worried about what he's going to be in the future, then I don't think you can get past that. I think that's kind of a thing where it's like that they have fears about character at such a deep level.
I agree.
It's hard to make that decision.
Yeah, that's the difference between a PR move and a character concern, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're worried about him in the locker room, then that's legitimate. If you're worried about the PR, like I don't want to downplay anything. Because let me just say, like, I actually don't know what happened, and so I would hate to like condemn a young kid when I don't have any details, right? Mm-hmm. So, but to your point, I think you're describing the difference between a PR move and being legitimately concerned for the state of your locker room.
Agree.
Well, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because that's what I was actually gonna ask you guys about, because this has been one of the biggest talking points when it comes to recruiting this year is does Miami pull the trigger and try and flip Terrence Lewis from Tennessee, or does sometimes these kids from Dade County, Broward County, they need to get out of there just to, grow as people, getting them out of that environment. And I think a lot of Canes fans don't really understand that point of view. I don't know. Would you guys kind of agree? And I'm at the, I'm kind of the same way that you guys think. If if it's something that in their past and Manny feels like he can, work with Terrence and try to, make sure it doesn't happen again, then yeah, I'm for it. But if they think that something could happen in the future and that it's it's a tough situation to think about. But I don't know. Do you guys think that some of these South Florida players need to get out of South Florida?
That's an interesting one because you hear that all the time. Every cycle there's a group of guys where their family says, oh, they got to get away, and some of them end up getting in trouble no matter what. So I don't know if it's necessarily to get out, but I think if you're going to get in trouble, whether you're in Coral Gables or you're in Gainesville, you're at Auburn, you're at Montana State, if you're going to get in trouble, you're going to get in trouble. Every situation's different. So I'm not talking about any one specific guy, but I never really kind of bought into that they need to get away, because if they do get away, less supervision. There might be some, troubling aspects of their lives, right down the street. But at the end of the day, if you're going to get in trouble, you're going to get in trouble. And, if you go away, it's going to happen anyway if that's who you truly are. But if you're able to mature and grow, you'll keep yourself out of those types of situations.
Yeah, and I think a big part of it too is the support systems that are in place. Like a kid can go to a different school far away, and then he's kind of forced into like going with that support system that's installed there. Like if a kid from South Florida goes to Alabama, there's no one from back home in Alabama now besides maybe a couple of teammates, right? So the inherent support system of the University of Alabama football team is everything he has, right? So he always goes to it. In South Florida, if a kid stays home, he might lean towards the old support system that he kind of, he grew up with, which, may in a lot of cases, they're there for the right thing, but they're also probably there for your personal best benefit and not so much the best benefit of the team as a whole. So like a kid could go and say, I'm not getting enough playing time, this and that. They might say to him, well, then, you need to do what's best for you. Whereas if a kid goes to Alabama and they say, I'm frustrated because of playing time, well, they're going to say, it's part of the process. If you want to be a first-round pick in 2 years, you may have to sit this year, So I think that also plays into it, where if they're home, they just have more things that they can maybe go to. But if they buy into the University of Miami support system and they kind of leave, home at home, and like that's, I'm going to work now. I'm doing this job. I'm doing this job. I use air quotes because, they're not getting paid, but they're doing this job for the eventual benefit of making it to the NFL. Then I think they'll be better. Then I don't think there'll be any issue. So it's about what support system they choose to follow.
Okay. Well, I want to switch up the topics a little bit here. We've seen a lot of upsets in the greater college football landscape so far this season. So I'd be interested to hear if we all zoom out a little bit. There's been complaints about Rhett Lashley in the offense, for being inconsistent, and I think those are those are deserved, right? Like our offense hasn't been consistent. And then also the same for Blake Baker on defense. I was vocal about that early in the year. But what I want to ask all three of you, Marsh included, do you feel like we're one of the more balanced teams in college football right now?
Yes. I think the stats kind of back that up to a point. We've dropped 40 and 50 burgers on some people, and we've also held teams to under 20 points, and we've also pretty much had everything in between. We did get smacked by Clemson, but that's not a super big deal in the grand scheme of things for where this team is at right now. But I think this bye week came at a good time for us, and I think that hopefully they finally take advantage of it and they kind of get themselves on even ground, so to say, so that they are a little bit more consistent going forward. But this end of the stretch of the season, especially with Virginia Tech and UNC looming, it's going to tell us all we need to know about this team. But to answer your question, it sounds like we're pretty balanced in terms of offense and defense. We're not elite at either one at this point, but we're also not bad at either one either.
I think we have a lot of the same, complaints about both sides of the ball too, which kind of lends itself to what Billy was talking about, where, we'd want to have more consistency from some key guys, that's on the offensive line. That's in the second level of the defense. We want to have our like big time playmakers step up more consistently. That's in the wide receiver position and the running back spot on offense, and defensive ends and corners like on the defensive side. But at the same time, I don't think we've been bad anywhere at any point outside of the Clemson game. Like we've always shown up and competed, and while we haven't been great at all times, we've had moments of greatness, and I think that's encouraging to see. And I do think that another important part of it, we do have like outstanding special teams, which is not something we've had a lot of if you could think over the past like 5 years, it hasn't been that way. Like think back to like Bosher and his time here, and Pat O'Donnell, and like we've had some pretty good, we've had a pretty good run of special teams players like over time, but very rarely at the same exact time, and very rarely so good as our guys are now. Mm-hmm. If we could get a little bit more out of the return game, I would say that we'd have one of the best overall special teams units in the whole country. So that also lends itself to be pretty strong in the whole balance category.
Yeah, I'm kind of in agreement with Bill and Chris. I think that we're not on the elite level of teams like an Alabama or a Clemson. We're just not there. But we're also not at a level where we're putting ourselves in a position to get blown out in games. Besides the Clemson game, I think that Manny Diaz has taken a lot of heat about the last 2 wins, but I sent out a tweet a few days ago that this team is learning how to actually win these kind of games instead of the last few years where we may have lost these kind of games. So I think that you have to have a balanced attack to do that. Sometimes the defense is going to carry the offense, and sometimes the offense is going to carry the defense. And in a lot of points where people don't realize, the special teams carries both sides. I mean, Lou Hedley has won us maybe a few games, but I think it's we're working our way towards a more balanced attack. We're just trying to find that perfect chemistry, I think, or not perfect chemistry. I think it's just that workability chemistry.
Yeah, and this is going to be a positive Jordan sighting, who hasn't come out much this year. But I mean, when you look at the greater college football landscape, I'm not sure. I've been thinking about some of my takes, and I don't think I've been giving them relative to what's going on around us, right? Because we're seeing all of these teams that are just like tripping over themselves, losing to bad teams. I mean, like Oklahoma and Texas were 500 like 4 games into the year. Just weird stuff is going on. And even though we haven't looked great, we don't look great compared to a normal year, right? If this was a normal season and everyone was playing how they normally do, then we're not up to par. But considering how everyone else looks, I think we might even be in like that second tier of teams. I think Florida has a better offense than we do, but our defense is much better than Florida's. Oh, yeah. And so like if we played them, it might be a pretty good game. I'm not willing to say just yet that Florida's better than we are. And that goes for teams like Georgia and just other teams of the like that. I don't know. We're pretty balanced. Like neither side of the ball is bad, and that's great.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. So my last question for you two guys, Chris, I want you to give us an NC State player on offense that Miami has to look out for, and then Bill, I want you to do the same thing, but for the NC State defense.
Well, I know it's going to sound kind of weird based upon what we said before about even the NC State fans aren't really thinking too much about it, but like at the end of the day, if you can make sure that you don't make their backup quarterback into a star, you're going to win that game. And I know it sounds easy to say, but if Bailey Hockman comes out playing like a house on fire and has a great game, then you have no one to blame but yourselves on the defensive side of the ball for allowing it to happen. And too often we've allowed backup quarterbacks to come in and out of nowhere have these like random like game of their lives type situations where like this guy is not that good. And like it happened in 2017 when Kenny Pickett like was first starting out and he came out there and like this young kid at the time like blew us out of the water on a 2017 team that was really good. Like that made no sense at the time, and people, no one expected that when it happened. Like, we have to make sure we don't make a star out of a guy who's not a star. If we can ensure that we keep him down, don't let him do anything. Like you said, be aggressive. We're gonna win this game.
Yeah, and